In this video, we're going to talk about a very important concept in AWS security, what you need to secure and what AWS secures for you. We'll look at the shared responsibility model in more detail and mention practical examples that walk you through the main ideas that fall on you as the customer. In our previous video, we mentioned the fact that moving to AWS doesn't remove your security responsibilities, it changes them. AWS provides a secure foundation, and you're responsible for what you build on top of it. Any data you put into AWS is your responsibility, including files stored in S3, records in databases, logs collected from your applications, and so on and so forth. You're responsible for access control, which means deciding which users, roles, and applications can read, write, or delete the data. You're responsible for data lifecycle and retention, which means defining retention policies, deciding when data is deleted and whether older data is archived or not. And you're responsible for data protection, which means choosing encryption options, backup strategies, versioning, and recovery mechanisms. Next, you're responsible for your applications, platforms, and identity and access management, or IAM. This includes everything you build or operate on AWS, such as web applications, APIs, internal tools, integration with on-premises environments, or other clouds. Your responsibilities here include identity design, which means creating IAM users, roles, groups, and defining how users and applications authenticate. The other one is permission management, which means writing policies that control what identities can access and what actions they're allowed to perform, and securing access paths, which means protecting entry points such as VPNs, direct connect, cross-account access, and external integrations. Now let's move to the next layer, which includes operating systems, networks, and firewalls. When you use services like EC2 and VPC, you're responsible for configuration and security at their layer as well, which means operating systems on EC2 for patching and updating the OS and installed software, including security updates. VPC network design, which means defining subnets, route tables, gateways, and overall network architecture. Traffic controls, which means configuring security groups, network ACLs to control inbound and outbound traffic, and external connectivities, which means securing connections to on-premises environments or other cloud platforms. Another major responsibility is encryption, which applies in three key areas. The first one is client-side encryption, which means making sure data is encrypted by your applications before it's sent to AWS. The second one, encryption in transit, which means making sure the data is protected while moving across networks, typically using HTTPS or TLS. And server-side encryption, which means making sure the data is encrypted at rest by AWS services such as S3, RDS, and so on. Across all of this, you're responsible for choosing when and where encryption is used, controlling access to encryption keys, often with AWS KMS, and ensuring sensitive data is never stored or transmitted without protection. Now, referring to our previous videos, you remember that your responsibilities often described as security in the cloud, which means your applications, identities, network, and encryption choices. And on the other hand, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, which means physical data center security and hardware, the core infrastructure, and underlying software that runs AWS services. Now, depending on the service type and deployment method you choose, some responsibilities can shift more toward AWS, which leads us to managed services. Managed services introduce a middle ground in the shared responsibility model. When you use managed services like, for example, Amazon RDS, AWS handles more operation tasks such as database engine maintenance, patching, and some backup operations. However, even with managed services, you still control access, which means using IAM, security groups, and network configurations, and you still configure encryption and networking, which means deciding how data is encrypted, how keys are managed, and how services are exposed. Managed services reduce operational effort, but still they don't remove your responsibility for security in the cloud. Now, before we wrap up, let's quickly recap the key takeaways you need to remember from this video. Moving to AWS changes your responsibilities, but it doesn't remove them. Any data you put into AWS is your responsibility to protect and control. AWS secures the cloud itself, including data centers, hardware, networking, and core AWS services, and you secure your workloads, including EC2, containers, IAM users and roles, VPCs, and security groups. Encryption and keys are your responsibility, including KMS keys, S3 encryption, RDS encryption using TLS, and so on and so forth. And managed services reduce ops work and offload more responsibility to AWS, but some responsibilities like security configuration are still on your burden, like RDS access, IAM policies, and network rules. Alright, and that is it for this video, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video.